to shine a light on, when racism shows up, when people are acting out of fear and harm, just shining a light up. I can't do it all, Julie, but I do my part and what's possible in my daily walk. I hope this podcast will reach out and reach people, and what I have to say and what Pamela has to say will resonate with them.
Hello, and welcome to a special episode of the Mother's Quest podcast in honor of Black History Month, featuring two extraordinary Black women, Susan Burton and Pamela Marshall, who are shaping history in real time, breaking cycles of incarceration for women through their work with the organization A New Way of Life. I first met Susan and Pamela through Democracy Clothing, the brand my sister Caren founded, when we visited A New Way of Life to bring clothing to the staff and residents, and later invited a group of their mothers to the Democracy studio. Spending time with them, seeing their impact firsthand, and later reading Susan's memoir, I was struck by how they transform personal loss and systemic harm into healing and hope for women rebuilding their lives. Susan founded A New Way of Life in 1998 after surviving nearly 2 decades in the cycle of incarceration herself. Following the devastating loss of her young son, her grief led to substance abuse that was criminalized and punished again and again instead of supported. After her 6th release from prison, she finally experienced recovery rooted in dignity and opportunity, and committed to bringing that same humanity to other women. What began as one home in South Los Angeles has grown into a nationally recognized reentry model that has provided safe housing to more than 1,800 women, reunited over 400 mothers with their children, and helped thousands clear legal barriers to employment and housing. This work is especially urgent given that the number of incarcerated women has increased by more than 600% since 1980, and that women returning home often face unique barriers, including higher rates of trauma, primary caregiving responsibilities, and limited gender-responsive reentry support. Susan is now a grandmother and a great-grandmother, building legacy across generations of women in more ways than one. Pamela's story is woven into that legacy. She joined A New Way of Life through a transitional employment program when Susan saw something special in her. Over time, she was mentored and trusted with greater responsibility, and eventually Susan passed the baton. Today, as one of 2 co-directors, Pamela carries the vision forward, expanding ANWOL's reach and impact. This conversation was recorded months ago, but the episode's release feels like it's arriving at exactly the right time. At this moment in our country, as state-sanctioned immigration raids harm families and destabilize communities across cities like Minneapolis, we feel the weight of injustice and wonder how to respond. And yet, we're also witnessing communities of care step forward, neighbors disrupting cycles of harm where they live, choosing solidarity over fear and acting from compassion. That is exactly what Susan and Pamela have been building for decades. Their wisdom grounds us in the knowledge that change begins close to home and is rooted in love. When I thought about who to invite to dedicate this episode and lead us into the conversation with Susan and Pamela, I immediately thought of Anna Malaika Tubbs, whose scholarship and storytelling expose the systems that marginalize women. She also celebrates the essential role Black mothers have played in advancing justice despite those forces, the very lineage Susan and Pamela embody through their work at A New Way of Life. Here's Anna with this episode's beautiful dedication. I'm Julie Neal, and this is Mother's Quest.
Hello, I'm Anna Malaika Tubbs, and I'm honored to dedicate this episode of the Mother's Quest podcast to Susan Burton and Pamela Marshall. I'm dedicating this episode to Susan and Pamela because their lives and leadership show us what it means to turn unimaginable loss into transformative change. Both women have reshaped the national conversation about incarceration, not through theory but through lived experience, moral clarity, and an unwavering commitment to dignity, healing, and freedom. I am a writer and the author of The Three Mothers, which explores the lives of Alberta King, Louise Little, and Berta Baldwin, the mothers who raised MLK Jr., Malcolm X, and James Baldwin. I am also the author of Erased, What American Patriarchy Has Hidden from Us, a book that examines how systems of power, and I also include incarceration, systemically disappear women, mothers, and families from our cultural and political imagination. Through my work, I've come to understand how deeply incarceration fractures families and how often the voices of women most impacted are ignored or sidelined. Susan Burton and Pamela Marshall stand as powerful counterforces to that erasure. Susan, the founder of A New Way of Life, has built pathways home for women returning from prison, demonstrating what community-based healing and reentry can truly look like. Pamela Marshall's advocacy and leadership are rooted in her own experiences, too. They have been essential in shaping policies and practices that center humanity, accountability, and second chances that we all deserve. This conversation speaks directly to the heart of this wonderful podcast, the power of mothering as a force for justice, the courage it takes to imagine a world beyond punishment, and the radical love required to build systems that allow people to come home to themselves, to their families, and to their futures. It's an absolute honor to help introduce this episode, and I'm deeply grateful to Julie for creating space for conversations like this, where our truths can be spoken, where our wisdom is honored, and where women like Susan and Pamela are heard in their full humanity and power. I hope you listen with an open heart and carry their words with you long after this episode ends.
Susan and Pamela, thank you so much for saying yes to this invitation to be interviewed on the Mother's Quest podcast and to do it together. I'm beyond honored to hold space for this conversation today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, I'm really glad to be here with you, Julie. We've been trying to get this together for a while now. So let's do it.
Let's go. The first question I ask every guest is to tell me a little bit about your childhood and the impact that your mother had in shaping who you are. And for today, I'd also like to add, in that journey, what was a spark moment that brought you to the work that you're doing today? And I thought we could start with you, Susan.
Oh, that's a deep and multifaceted question for me because, as you know, my childhood was threaded with so much harm and traumatic experiences. And, for many, many years, I gave the credit for that to my mom, and it wasn't a good credit. So I think coming a full circle and arriving at a place of understanding all that my mother had went through and endured as a Black woman coming out of the South, what she had learned and tolerated to be the norm is what she had to pass on to me. So I think a pivotal moment for me was getting to the realization of this and finding ways to forgive and fully love my mom and support her, understanding that the times that she was raised in, the conditions she was raised in, was much different from the times that I was raised in, and thereby in the conditions that I was raised in. So thereby, I have a responsibility to change the dynamic, to change the trajectory, to change the experiences of my children, that they're not harmed in their raising, in their being raised. And now I have a great granddaughter that I can really support and lean into with all the lessons learned, skills, knowledge, and resources that I know about now.
What you're saying is so profound. And I've been reading your memoir all weekends. There's so much that is powerful, but the impact of intergenerational trauma and the systems of poverty and racism is so clear. I can know this intellectually, but when I'm reading how it impacted your daily life and, as you said, layers of your relationships with your family, including your mother, it's staggering and it's also enraging. And it's really remarkable. Remarkable is not even a word that does it justice for how you were able to come through all of those experiences and all the things that were stacked against you to live a new way of life and to create a new way of life. Could you share a little bit about what you think was the spark moment that began to change everything for you and made that possible?
So, just as you read it, Julie, and you probably experienced some anger while reading through the pages of Becoming Miss Burton, I was angry. I was enraged at the things I had experienced, the things that had been done to me. I'll say that again because we had a motorcycle go by. As you read in Becoming Miss Burton, as you were reading, you probably got really angry and sad and all the stuff that I had to, all the experiences and emotions that I went through, not only living it, but rewriting the experiences in the book. And I was angry, and anger fueled me for a while. But there came to a place that anger was, I didn't find it useful. And I had to find a place and a way to begin to forgive. And I believe that it was the energy of forgiveness, the energy of letting go and opening up to something new and different. And I'll call that love, that allowed me to thrive. I think in the anger piece period of my life, I was just existing and tolerating. But when I began to forgive, and it was a process, there was a different force that was driving me. And it was much more beautiful, much more effective, much more broad, much more encompassing of all and everything and everybody. That I think that was the force to stop being angry, stop being mad, stop hating, and begin to love, begin to forgive, and to love people regardless of their imperfections and some of the things that they might have done. I think that one moment in someone's life does not define the totality of who they are. So how do I see more? How do I understand what drove people to do things that were so hurtful and so harmful?
Yeah. And what would you say you have been on a quest for since you were able to step into the power of forgiveness and love?
I have been on a quest to create joy, to end violence and harm, to create opportunities where others can have joy and others can thrive. I've been on a quest to end sadness and harm, to make us all safe in the world, safe to be just who we are.
And the vehicle for this in many ways has become creating community and literal homes for primarily women who are formerly incarcerated to come to upon release. And then also to create a movement out of that and to be able to change and advocate for laws and policies and things to be more just. There's so much that we may not be able to include here in the conversation today, but I'll make sure that I link to your website and other sources. And I know we're going to delve in a little bit more, but it's amazing to hear you talk about the deeper roots of what you're doing it's more than creating shelter and providing legal services and reuniting mothers with their children. And all of those things are major. But what you're really doing is changing the way that these women think about themselves and can think about the world.
Yes. Creating the opening, the vehicle, the foundation for it to happen. But Julie, we all have to do our individual internal work. But if you are not stable, if you are not safe, if you are not supported, it can be daunting to try to find joy, to try to find hope, and to develop a faith and realize how much you have to give and how important your life is.
Thank you for sharing all of this. And I had the honor of getting to walk through one of your homes and meet some of the women that you work with, and also the staff who are part of making all of it possible. And I know how deeply meaningful it is and the real connections that you're creating. And I'm so inspired by you. I'm thinking also a lot about Valerie Kaur and her Revolutionary Love Project. She talks a lot too about how she moved from being fueled by anger to being fueled by love, and how much love can be a powerful force. So I will make sure I link to that episode too. The most powerful force. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. And also, I want to acknowledge the first great grandmother that I've been able to interview. So this thread of intergenerational legacy is going to be so powerful in this conversation. Pamela, I'd love to hear from you now. Tell me a little bit about your childhood, the impact that your mom had in shaping you, and the spark moment that brought you to the work that you're doing today.
Yeah, Julie, I think for me, growing up in a household with 5 girls and just the generation that like my mother was raised in, her being the oldest of her siblings, she really took on a caregiver role in our home, even within our entire family of, just being the oldest, caring for everyone else, loving everyone, working hard to provide and protect her family. I see a lot of that in my ways now as an adult, as a mom today, just giving to everyone else. I think one of the ways that my mother has shaped my life is being able to witness all that she gave and gave to others so freely and not to herself. And that was a pivotal realization of the life that I had started to create for her myself, that I started to care for everyone else and give to everyone else and protect everyone else, and to pour into myself less and less. And so now I'm in this quest, of course, to love and to give to others, but then also to love and give to like myself.
That's so powerful. And I'm excited to hear the ways that you are learning to do that. I'm wondering how you came to know Susan and do this work with a new way of life, and if there was a spark moment for you that brought you on the quest of your impact.
Yeah, I think, I've been so, like a lot of folks, raised in a world where we kept our head down and we just kept moving. And it was pretty much surviving. I had placed expectations on myself that I had to be this certain type of person. And it all came crashing down in 2012. And I needed to reinvent myself. And that is when I had the opportunity to meet Susan in a new way of life. And what I got was so much more than what I ever expected. A lot of the things that I wasn't taught in school about my community, my environment, I got at a new way of life. And I really found like my purpose, I feel like, in my life and my life journey and what I wanted to do moving forward.
And what I think I understand about your journey there is that you started out in a particular position and then you moved on into bigger and bigger roles. And now, if I understand it correctly, you're the co-director. Can you say a little bit about what that journey looked like?
Yeah, from the very beginning, my very first day stepping into a new way of life and meeting women who had been through the criminal justice system, who looked just like my sisters, my aunts, my friends and family, and hearing their journey and hearing their stories, it just made a connection for me of, just things that were happening deeper than what was on the news and what, perceptions and stereotypes were, that I knew that I wanted to get involved and I wanted to help however I could. And if it was just in the very beginning, organizing keys and working with the women to print out bus routes to help them get to their appointments, I knew that I wanted to do something to make a difference in the lives of not only the women at A New Way of Life, but into the lives of so many. And it started with just working in the homes. And we were a small group then. We had 5 homes, to doing whatever was needed to support the mission of A New Way of Life and seeing it grow 2012 until now. Now we have 12 safe homes across Los Angeles County. We have an international safe housing network replication model. There is a community of just women leaders across this entire world that are providing safety net for other women. And so to be a part of that journey these past 12 years has been really meaningful to not only myself, but to also my family and to the generation that's to follow.
Well, that seems like a great segue to start to talk about the EPIC life guideposts. I was sharing earlier that EPIC for me is this metaphor of what happens when we step into being the author of our story. And Susan, you've literally been the author of this incredible memoir. And Pamela, I'm so excited to see you continue to share your voice and tell your story. EPIC is also an acronym mnemonic for the guideposts that I think help us to live that kind of life when we're raising our kids. And we decided that each of you are going to share some of your wisdom on the guideposts. And the first one, E, is about engaging mindfully with our children. And Pamela, you already started to talk about this intergenerational connection, about what your mom was able to contribute and then what she was able to witness was possible because of that. And then now what you've been able to do and how you're seeing that impact your own children. I'd love to start there. What have you noticed has been possible for your children in witnessing what you do in the world?
So I have a 14-year-old daughter and 11-year-old son. And it's really important for me to be the one to educate them. Of course, they are both doing very well in school, but there's a lot of information and knowledge that isn't shared in the traditional school settings that it is important for them to be aware of, to, actually have a lens of what's going on in the world and how it affects their lives. So I've been really intentional about just having real conversations with them. Growing up, I was, sheltered and, I think my parents felt the need to hide a lot of information, a lot of what was going on. But I think it's really important for our children today to know and to understand so that they can have it to carry on into their future, and that we're raising caring and loving young people today to become caring and loving adults in the future.
What's an example of some of the things that you have been able to teach your children that you didn't learn when you were growing up?
One of the things I think I've been able to share in the work that we do, especially with my daughter being a young woman, is to use her voice and to exercise her right, and that she can dream the impossible, like anything is possible. I think for myself growing up, I kept my face in the book and, did as I was told. And I think it's important for my children to have a voice and to be able to stand up if something doesn't feel right and to be brave and courageous.
A lot of the time I talk about what I call epic snapshot moments. And these are those moments where you feel like, this is everything I've been working towards and wanting to see, like the moment that you'd like to bottle up and hold on to. I'm curious if you have an epic snapshot moment that comes to mind with one of your kids where you saw them using their voice and being brave because of the lessons you've been teaching them.
Yes, I have. So, my daughter actually experienced something in middle school that she was able to, just come forth and, tell someone. And to me, that was that moment where she could have, stayed silent, but she chose to use her voice and to see her, really be more than I ever was, to come forward and be strong and bold and courageous and say, like, no, I want to stop this from happening to someone else, was that moment for me.
That's incredible. And having been immersed in the pages of Becoming Miss Burton, Susan, your memoir, there were so many moments where I'm sure other people have said this too, like you want to like scream through the pages. No, like this is not okay. So it's so powerful to hear, Pamela, you changing that cycle. I look forward to continuing to see what's possible for your kids with what you're building and sharing with them. Susan, I want to move to the second guidepost now, which stands for the P stands for passionate and purposeful impact, and hear about what you're trying to change. We talked about the deeper level of transformation that's happening with every individual person that you connect with. And I'm also so inspired by the systemic and larger change that you have been a force for. What is at the top of your list of things that you're trying to make different in terms of the larger impact? And I want to add to that when we were setting intentions for the call today, I felt like there's so much that's very heartbreaking in the news and the headlines right now. And it's so much I think we can learn from you about what's needed if you're able to also make some connections to what you see unfolding in the country and what you think we can all do about it.
It's a lot happening out there that will distract and pull, I'll say, my energy, my focus, my intention, my hope, and my joy. So, Julie, I stay away from all of the news and headlines. It's a struggle to manage it all. And I don't want to struggle like that. It's almost like you're struggling against ghosts. So I stay away from the news and the headlines. I do read a paper and read captions on papers, and I'm like, I don't want to read that.
Yeah.
I don't want to get pulled into that deep, dark hole. I don't want to have people or the media douse me with fear of the what ifs. So, I stay away from that type of influence on my mind, my energy, and my spirit. And I just go about looking and seeing opportunities to change things, opportunity to feed into places where I know people are getting safety, joy, opportunity, discipline. Like, for instance, I was at a conference and these little girls came in called the Divas of Compton. They were drumming and they were dancing. And I followed up with them and I went to their site where they were practicing. What I saw was little girls in a place that they were safe. They were being recognized. They were being trained. There was a lot of joy, laughter, exercise, body movement, and girls moving in harmony with one another. And I was like, I want to support this. I want to see them safe. I want to see them heard. I want to see them seen. I want to see them getting disciplined through exercise and dance lessons. I want to be a part of that. And so now I'm a tiny part of that. I don't know the impact it will have in the future, but I know that it's good work that this woman is doing without many resources, just with a desire and a hope and a dream. And this is a woman that came out of the school system because she says what they were doing to children was wrong. And she wanted to do something that was going to feed and uplift and not, demonize little Black girls, not say they're too loud, they're too aggressive, they're too this, they're too that. And that's what our society does to little girls, little Black girls.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, well, first of all, when you started to say that about the black hole and fighting against the ghost, I noticed I was feeling very emotional because it can feel so overwhelming. And so I love this example of, it's just one of so many things out there of people who, as you said, they see an opportunity and they're doing something like right in front of them in their lives, in the community that they see that they can make a difference in, which of course you do so well. I think what I struggle with, while I so appreciate and believe in the power of that, I do also see the importance of trying to make more systemic change. And I'm in the part of your book now where you started to move towards that. How do you balance and reconcile the showing up for even the small local and community efforts and how impactful that can be and how important that is, while also trying to look at the broader systems and how to impact the many?
We had a new way of life, and I think Pamela led this effort. And, the other part for me as an elder in the community, it's important to build new and younger leadership to continue the work that the foundation has already been laid for. So I think Pamela led this effort, and she is the younger generation for me. She led this effort to ensure women inside of carceral systems in California have sanitary supplies and toilet paper. And for me, Julie, it's heart-wrenching and heartbreaking that we would need to pass legislation for that to happen. So I remember in 2001 through 2006, I was working to restore food stamps to people who had a drug conviction. In California, people that had a drug conviction were ineligible to get food stamps after they were released from prison. And I fought for the passage of that legislation for 5 years continuously. And our elected officials just could not get it passed. And I would see women at a new way of life. We made sure that they ate. We made sure we bought food for them. But we would have some who were, say, convicted of manslaughter, or convicted of first-degree murder, or convicted of burglary, and they were able to get food stamps. But the women who were convicted of possession of drugs, other health and safety code violations that had to do with drug use or drug paraphernalia and so forth, were ineligible to get food stamps. And I remember coming back from Sacramento where I was working on that bill. And the next morning I woke up and I could barely move because my body was in knots. My muscles, my joints had taken on some type of energy from up there or some type of hopelessness at our elected officials and our legislative process that it had made me physically ill. So I will work on legislation, but meanwhile, my belief is that the change that we need to see in our nation is in the hearts and the minds of all of us. It doesn't live in Washington, D.C. or in Sacramento. It lives in our hearts and in our minds. And the media will distort what's there.
One thing I want to talk about for a minute, I wish we had more time to keep going further, but one thing I want to talk about is the way in which those who have addiction are criminalized. I mean, this is another thing. I'm sure you get feedback from people reading your book that you want to just throw the book across the room at all of the times where you needed support and healing and help, and instead were sent to jail, which then made, when you exited, your ability to try to have a new way of life exponentially harder. It makes no sense. It's also not just in terms of one reality for people who are of a certain race and income level, and the reality that's true for those who are living in poverty, are Black and brown. It's so infuriating. I'm also wondering then, what have you learned about how to start to change the hearts and minds of people and change the narrative about this?
Just creating the opportunity for people to see something different, be a part of something different, and to shine a light on, when racism shows up, when people are acting out of fear and harm, just shining a light up. I can't do it all, Julie, but I do my part and what's possible in my daily walk. I hope this podcast will reach out and reach people, and what I have to say and what Pamela has to say will resonate with them. But Julie, the other thing I want to bring up and bring out is that I realize that our political system was born out of the violence and racism of this nation. It's rooted. And do I think that I am going to get what's really fair and just out of it? No, I don't. But I think that, again, in the hearts and the minds of people, one day I pray, I hope, I work towards, there will be a coming, aha, I don't want to be like that moment for them. And we'll move the needle a little bit, or we'll move the needle a whole lot.
I'm going to do my best to spread the word about this conversation and encourage everybody I know to read your memoir. I'm also going to include a link in the show notes to your interview on the Kelly Clarkson show, which I was watching yesterday with Evie, who I had the opportunity to meet when I came out to visit A New Way of Life. And, any preconception that you have about a young woman leaving formerly incarcerated melts away when you see the joy and the talent and the impact and the love and the appreciation that was so evident in even just that slice of the interview.
Yeah. She is a sweet girl. She was really harmed while incarcerated. She was raped by guards, molested and tossed around, passed around, and punished for not allowing them to take advantage of her while incarcerated. This is the prison system that our society relies on so heavily for social ills, and we can do better. And I hope to demonstrate that through A New Way of Life.
Well, one of the ways that we can do better is to care for ourselves and our own growth and learning, and make sure that we're creating the opportunity for us to continue to do impactful work. So I'm appreciating all the lessons actually that you've already woven into what you've shared about how to invest and care for yourself, because some of the things you do are to protect your ability to continue to show up for the people that you love and that you are shaping. Pamela, I'd love to hear your reflections now on the I invested in yourself guidepost. You also shared that you, for so long, poured so much of yourself into your children and into your work, and that this has been an area of shift for you. What have you been learning about how to care for yourself and how to make sure that you're also filling your cup?
I think, Julie, for me, it's all of the things that Susan just spoke on. When I think about how I invest in, myself, typical way is like, oh, a spa day and go get a massage. Trust me, I do like all those things. But to take it a little bit deeper and just to be able to love myself and appreciate myself. And so to, treat myself with kind words, to take those moments to recognize and appreciate the little things each day. So I close out every day with just a positive from the day. And so I'm going to sleep with joy that I accomplished something. And I think it's important to be able to instill in yourself kind words and appreciation and recognition so that you can get up the next day and, feel like, okay, my cup is just a little bit more full.
You made my day one day months ago when you sent me a text because you had listened to an episode with Melissa Walker from the States Project. And you said that you started your day with some window time, which is one of her practices that helps her stay in the challenging work. I loved receiving that. And
That was so impactful and amazing. I listened to podcasts on the way to work and driving the kids to school. And it just so happens that day. So when I got to the school, I parked outside and just seeing the kids on the playground. And I think that is really like my why. Our children are our future and we have to invest in them and pour into them, just as Susan was talking about the Divas of Compton, just having safe spaces for like young Black girls to really thrive, I think is important for our future and for the impact that we want to see happen in the world and the shift that's needed. Because oftentimes Black women and Black girls are so often forgotten about and not thought of.
That's making me think about the work of another former podcast guest of mine, Anna Malika Tubbs, who Susan, I know you know, because Anna said, oh my goodness, I love Susan. And I think she's going to try to send some copies of her new book, which is called Erased, which talks about the impact of patriarchy in erasing the impact of women and mothers, and particularly Black women and mothers. I'm sitting in awe right now of all of the different powerful voices of women and mothers who are continuing to show up, fueled by love and noticing like even the small things. I think that's one of the takeaways I'm already getting from this conversation about how it could be so easy to get lost in, as you said, Susan, the black hole of the systems and the policies and the politics. But something as simple as stopping to see the young girls playing on the playground and help that remind you why what you're doing really matters is something that we can all pay more attention to.
Yes.
Susan, that brings us to the last guidepost C, which stands for connected to a strong support network. And this guidepost is about remembering that we do not have to be on this journey alone. What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned about how to build community and benefit from community?
I once asked Angela Davis about 15 years ago how she keeps going. And she said, I keep going through community. And so through my daily walk and through connections, I find people who are like-minded. I find people who I want the best for and people that want the best for me. And I build community and I lean on that community. I nourish that community and I trust that community. And that doesn't mean that everyone agrees with everything that I say or do, or that I believed in, that I agree with everything that they say or do. But it means that we are community and we are connected and that we overall support one another. And it's so important for us to have yaysayers around us in that community and not naysayers.
I've never heard that expression before, yaysayers. I love that.
Yeah.
One of the things I noticed about you from learning more about your journey is that actually there are multiple times I've experienced this from you, that you are also open to building relationship and trust across what could be seen as a division. We're more polarized and divided, I feel like today, maybe than ever before. What has enabled you to see people as whole human beings, worthy and valuable and able to be loved, even when there are these differences. Because I think we're all struggling with this right now.
Yeah, well, I think it's just love. Love is just love. And we can love through differences. You know, it's like you have to put on other people's shoes sometimes to be able to experience their humanity, their pain, their distrust. And because of their distrust doesn't mean that you can't trust. That's not saying that you get vulnerable and make yourself vulnerable. But, we're all connected, Julie.
Yeah.
We're just all connected. And I feel those connections.
The morning when I do podcast interviews, I try to spend a little bit of time on my morning deck. I do some yoga and a little bit of meditation, and there's a prayer that I sing. And I also like to pull an oracle or tarot card, which I never think is about telling the future. It's just like, okay, how might this card be a mirror for something that I can take into my day? And the card that I pulled today was the collective card. I'll share it with you. I'll send it to you after, and I can link to it in the show notes too, from a dear coach and mentor of mine, Lindsay Para. The themes of the card are exactly what you're talking about. It's helping us remember and realize that we are all connected. And I think whatever we all can do to continue to reach out and build relationships with people and help us all remember. I feel like it's almost a remembering that we're all connected. It does feel like it seems like it's simple. It's hard to do, but so central to all the change that we want to see.
It's only hard to do because of what we've learned in this world. Part of my development was unlearning a lot of things.
Yeah. What do you think was the biggest thing you unlearned?
That we're not separate.
Yeah. Well, this brings us to an opportunity for both of you to offer me and anyone listening that wants to say yes, an invitation or a challenge that can help us more fully live our epic lives. Would you offer us?
I would say to invest in yourself and others. It doesn't have to be either or, it can be both.
And is there a particular practice, something tangible you'd like to see us do that you think can help us to realize that?
Find the joy. I think to find the joy, find one positive moment each day that you can take into tomorrow.
I like that. So for me, I'm going to find one positive moment each day when I invested in myself and found joy, and when I was able to contribute to somebody else and found joy. Thank you for that, Pamela.
Beautiful.
And Susan, what about you?
Yeah, mine is along the same line. To stop and help someone and allow yourself to feel the vibration from that and resonate with it.
I love that. It's so interesting too, because the episode I released just before we did this interview was with Rabbi Caren Brous. Do you two know her yet?
No, not yet.
I have all these introductions I need to make. She's the rabbi at a congregation called Ikar, and she wrote a book called The Amen Effect. And I'm going to forget the complete title, but it's about like how we mend our hearts in a broken world. And there were so many themes of that conversation that are so resonant and intertwined with the conversation that the three of us are having today. So I think you're on a collective mission to see one another's humanity and to pay attention to these small moments of joy and contribution that we can make not only to ourselves, but also to others. Okay. Well, this is the closing part of our conversation. I can't believe our time is already up. I'm so grateful for all that you shared. And I know I'm going to listen again and be able to take in even more meaning when I do that. I would love to give you both space to identify anything that you feel like you're taking away from this conversation or is maybe coming into even more clarity for you as a result of the time we spent together. And then I'll close us out with some of what I'm taking.
Julie, I just want to say thank you. I know this has been a long time coming, but the one thing that I'm really taking away from is just the connection. That was my intention for this call, and I'm really walking away with it, that, we are all connected.
Thank you, Pamela.
I think this conversation for me, Julie, has allowed me to understand just how far I've traveled from what was and the way I was and the way I thought, the way I lived, to how beautiful and calming and wonderful life can be, or life is, and how much I love the world and its people.
Thank you, Susan. What an immense joy it is to witness in the ways I've been able to through meeting you and seeing your work and reading your book and hearing you share your lessons today. Just the incredible journey you've been on, and what a gift you are to so many of us. What an inspiration. And one of my intentions coming into the call was to be able to feel the power of legacy building. And I think that is one of my big takeaways. I felt the presence of the prior generations of mothers. Each of your mothers experienced their world and showed up in motherhood in different ways based on their own experiences. There's been an evolution. And so I'm seeing the power of what has been possible for you, Susan. I know in mending your relationship with your own daughter and now being a great grandmother. And Pamela, hearing you talk about the lessons that you're bringing to your own children. And then both of you, the ways in which you mother others who are not your biological children. That was also feeling so evident in the joy that you see in young Black girls and in the women that you welcome into your homes. So I'm leaving reminded about the power of love, the power of connection, the intergenerational evolution that we are all on this journey. And I will definitely pay attention to the joy that I can find in myself and in contributing to others. So thank you for all of these gifts.
You are so welcome.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you so much for coming along with me on this episode of the Mother's Quest podcast. I hope this conversation sparked something that will help you live your epic life. If you'd like to get show notes and learn more about how to join the Mother's Quest community, visit mothersquest.com. And while you're there, I would love it if you would follow the prompts to subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, and help us to spread the word. I want to end with some words to help light the way on your quest. Seize the day, love your people, honor your gifts. Until next time.